So, for those of you who can't remember or are new to the college, my name's Dave Atkins. I run all of the outdoor programs. I will be attending one of the Mittagundi programs, but while the first Mittagundi set of dates are on, I'll be running the Year 9 program out in the West Macdonald Ranges. So some staff that are out on Year 9 will then go and sort of hot shoe it straight out onto Mittagundi with the second departure. So thank you for coming. I'm glad we've sort of got sorted that we're in here. We do have, there's a couple of staff members that will be attending as well. So we've got Mr. Johnson up the back there. He's heading out with the first group. Graham was also going, and we've got Debbie Page down the front. Emma will also be going back to Mittagundi. She hasn't made it down there for a few years, and I'll be going as well. So there's a little bit of experience in the room about what it might entail. So hopefully, as we go through, we'll get a little bit of an idea about what Mittagundi's actually like. And for those people that have already signed up, I think probably 85% have already said, yes, my child is definitely going, we're fully committed, which is awesome. And then probably there's a little bit of a percentage that are sitting on the fence for more information, which is very understandable. So what can we expect? The clothing and equipment. Funnily enough, in Alice Springs, we are not very well equipped for snowy environments. We're not really used to the rain or prolonged exposure to the elements, more than sort of a light shower for a couple of hours and then go home to the air conditioner or whatever it is that we sort of have access to, the heaters, during winter. We'll talk a little bit about the groups. Although the groups have been pretty comprehensive and well and truly already allocated towards dates, because we've already sort of put that out and you guys have sort of voted with your feet, and students have already made some effort at choosing a buddy, so hopefully they'll still be friends by the time they get to Mittagundi in July. But those kids that really needed a buddy to go along with would have been allocated one accordingly. We'll look at the responsibilities of the students and like actions and questions that are sort of coming up. So where does Mittagundi fit in? Hopefully most of us have been on Year 7. We went out for 3 days, 2 nights to the West Max, out towards Simpsons Gap. Some or most of us should have been out on Year 8. 5 days, 4 nights. It was starting to get a little bit more full on Year 8. And then most of us in this room went on Year 9. And we went out for 9 days and 8 nights. And some of us sort of went, "Whoa, that was actually pretty hard, pretty full on. I can't believe I've been away from my device and I had to sleep next to other people for 8 nights. I'm not really used to that." So now we're here at the stage where we're in Year 10 and our program runs for 11 days. So we have a couple of days of travel in there and 9 days on site at Mittagundi with some aeroplanes involved and some long coach journeys to get to places. Most of us haven't had any vomiting in our transport so far on St Philip's programs. There's a good chance that someone's going to spew and then somebody else will spew on the bus and then somebody else will spew. So if you're in that point where long car journeys and windy roads may affect you, start thinking about that now. Hopefully once we've done Year 10, we'll be sort of relieved. Maybe some of us will have incurred a little bit of something that might be a little bit like frostbite or frost nip. I think in the last 5 years, we've had 2 diagnoses locally of like something that resembles a cold-related injury, potentially because students in their stinky feet and wet socks and prolonged exposure to the cold without changing their socks on a regular basis or not having the regulation sort of 18 pairs of socks could be part of the issues there. So we want to make sure that we sort of address some of those things. But hopefully they make it out onto Year 11 Aspire, which we get pretty remote and we do cross over some of the areas that we've been on Year 9. However, the focus is more about self-reflection, leadership, the environment, and communication on that one. So it's quite a step up on students' ability in Year 11. And it is offered as a stage 1 subject. So you can actually get 10 credits for that Year 11 subject. So 10 days, 10 credits, could be the easiest credits you get towards your NTCE. So if you know that you might be sitting on the fence and really want to drop maths or something, going on that Year 11 Aspire is the same as sitting in maths for 2 terms. You will get the same amount of credit for being in maths or English or any of those other subjects for 2 terms of Year 11. So you might like to play that game a little bit. Then also next year you'd have access to stage 2 ideally, where you might be able to get pushed off a cliff repeatedly at Mount Arapiles. You might be exposed to very high places, go to some amazing locations. And they also do a walk on the Larapinta Trail as stage 2s, a self-reliant journey where, get dropped off by the bus and the bus comes back 5 days later, but there isn't the four-wheel drive support and the staff sort of sitting in the middle because it's a smaller group, cooking on fuel stoves instead of on fires like many of our other programs. Then Year 12 Advance, we turn it down a few notches and the whole group goes out at once, which is like absolutely diabolical because every student in the year level goes to the same place at the same time and do the same activities on site, usually at Ross River for 3 days. So the focus is very different, distinctly different from our outdoor education program. It is more around developing our relationships, effective work habits if we haven't settled into Year 12 already, and maybe a quick sort of slap across the knuckles by some heads of house to pull ourselves in line and get ready for the academic rigour of semester 2. So, where are we going? We're going to get on a plane and travel down to Melbourne, and most people, if they've engaged with Operoo, might have had access to the letter, so flight details and times and those sorts of things are already in the second letter to parents, which is available. All this stuff's available via Schoolbox under outdoor programs. It's available on the website, or it's available in that Operoo portal if you can negotiate in there. So we go down to Melbourne and we actually get on a bus and travel on that first day quite late into the evening. So if there's no flat tyre and the bus arrives relatively close to on time, the arrival into Bairnsdale is probably in the vicinity of 10:30 or 11 p.m. that night. So there's a lot of sitting that first day, so it probably doesn't really count as an active day. But we obviously are fairly involved and we're a long way from Alice Springs at this point. So it's a long journey. The bonus about doing that journey that day and on the first day is that the next day from Bairnsdale through to Mittagundi for that really windy road is not as long as a bus ride. So we can get there sort of mid-morning before lunch and get settled into Mittagundi on the day. But you can kind of get the picture. It's in Melbourne and then it pretty much traverses across the whole of Victoria to get to Mittagundi in the Bogong High Plains. You can see Alpine National Park. So we're right on the foothills there. Mittagundi. So we talked a little bit about 11 days, 2 days flying, 9 days at Mittagundi. So SPC groups are split in half on arrival. So with your departure group, you'll be on a large party bus, a party plane and a party bus. Everyone will be jammed in together. And then once we get to Mittagundi, the two groups separate. And one group start off at Ian's, which is an original sort of settlement that was created at Mittagundi by the founder in Stapleton. So they're based over there for a couple of days. And that group would be the first group that goes to the snow. And the other group would be at Mittagundi proper at the larger sort of residential space with bigger cabins and those sorts of things. But they spend a few days at the farm. The first few days at the farm, sorting out jobs and those sorts of things. And then the two groups swap over. When one group gets back from the snow, the other group heads to the snow and they swap locations. So you're exposed to both areas at Mittagundi. So it is fairly exciting and there's probably a little bit of a swap over of skis and things like that in between, which is always important to get the driest options for ski boots. So 2 departure dates. Hopefully people have got a little bit of an idea when their departure date is committed at this stage. If not, it'll be in Operoo. So we do have 96 positions available this year, and I think we're up to about 92 filled. So there might be sort of that 3 to 4 spots for people if they're sort of sitting on the fence or haven't sort of indicated that they were keen, or new students and those sorts of things. There might be an option that if you have an exchange student and you really want to submit them to a cold environment at Mittagundi, that you might be able to tee up your exchange student to fly into Melbourne, meet us down there, and then bring them back after being exposed to all your peers and Mittagundi, which might be quite full on for them. They might also have the option of going on the Year 9 program if they're an exchange student in semester 2. There is an expectation that after Mittagundi, so you would come back to the college and start classes immediately after. So Group 2 actually get back on a Monday and they would start classes on the Tuesday. And Group 1 would be starting classes at the start of that week 3. So they're away for the first 2 weeks of term, and then there's an overlap in week 2 there. Right. I'm going to stop talking for a little moment and we'll have a look at a black screen that hopefully will come up with what it's like at Mittagundi, and hopefully sound will magically come out.
Leave behind your fears and woes, your mobile phones and favourite TV shows. Strap on your pack and lace up your boots. Let's hit the beaten track. You never have to look back. We're gonna follow a trail through the high country, dance beneath the stars and drink some Billy tea. Make some new friends and share a story or two. Before too long you won't ever want to go back to the modern world with all its modern things. It drives us to distractions so complicating. The simple things can be hard to find. Don't take them for granted, don't leave them behind. Find something you might have lost. Gotta look deep inside despite the cost. It might be pretty difficult, be a little hard to do. At the end of it all, you'll get a glimpse of the real you. Without the modern world with all its modern things, you'll see through the layers of chocolate coating. The crap we're fed each and every day will melt like the snow and slowly fade away. Without the modern world in all its modern things, see through the layers of chocolate coatings. The crap we're fed each and every day will melt like the snow and slowly fade away.
All right. Hopefully you're starting to get a little bit of a picture about what Mittagundi is like. It is a pioneer style adventure. And you'll notice that there was plenty of wood chopping. There was plenty of green grass. So you could probably substitute most of the green grass for something that resembles a little bit more of a muddy consistency while we're actually there at Mittagundi. You did see some snow, but effectively we're going to cover over the sun, make it freezing cold. It's in a gully. It will be the average temperature is very cold. I think there are some issues associated with frostbite, frost nip, cold related injuries. The staff that are there for the whole winter sort of end up with cracked hands, like polar finger, all of these types of weird sort of things that, Ernest Shackleton was exposed to, and polar adventurers and stuff like that. Hopefully in those 9 days at Mittagundi, you might not get to that extreme, and with the equipment list provided and making sure that you keep your feet dry, that could be some ways to avoid some of those cold related injuries. So, the emphasis being around managing yourselves quite well. So we do want to make sure that as students, if your feet are really, really cold, which is highly likely at some point, there's a good chance that when you're in the snow, you'll actually be standing on the snow. If you're actually in the snow standing on your skis, suddenly your feet are a lot more insulated. So if you're prone oh my God, the skis are really hard and they don't sort of stand up by themselves, if you learn how to use the skis, then you're instantly sort of insulated from the snow whilst moving around in it. If your feet go through the snow and the snow sits on top of your boots because you're walking instead of skiing, then your feet will potentially catch snow, melt snow in between your shoelaces, in between any waterproofing that you could possibly have, whether the boots are new, old, wholly, wherever they fit. Water will go in there. If you're walking through Australian snow and it's coming up over your boots, it will then funnel down the inside of your shoe. Even if it has a Gore-Tex membrane in it, it can still fill up with water and your feet will get wet when you're standing on the snow. They will get cold and they will get frozen and turn into sort of, the biggest prune type features that you've ever seen in your life. Probably something like some sort of X-File creature when you take off your boots in the tent that night. So that is a bonus, that you will have some tents whilst in the snow, which is different from most of our other programs. It is very busy. So at the start of a day at Mittagundi, the staff are likely on a farm day to say, I'm doing this, who wants to come with me? I need 6 people. And that might be preparing meals in the kitchen, cooking bread, cooking a stew, cooking whatever is being cooked for the whole day. So it could be, there is plenty of food at Mittagundi. It's quite carbohydrate intensive. There are lots of rices, lots of pastas, lots of breads, those sorts of things. And it depends on how they've been cooked, which you guys will be heavily involved in the cooking, as to the consistency, whether they are sort of undercooked, overcooked, dry, burnt, flavourless, and so on. So lots of care and love in the kitchen for those people. There has been in the past a real tendency to have porridge. I'm not sure how many people are porridge advocates just yet. It is worth being able to stomach a good healthy dollop of porridge. But there are some other breakfast alternatives these days, because I feel like there have been many a hostage situation at Mittagundi where students are in tears or crying over the fact that they can't eat porridge, and that gets put into these metal bowls, which are very good for cleaning, but the metal bowl in the cold environment then turns the porridge into a congealed thing that sort of looks like a large scab, and it gets to the point where it's so cold that it's actually all joined together like some sort of oversized, thick sort of frisbee thing, and that is the hardest way to eat your porridge. Usually sultanas and brown sugar are provided to sort of, coat porridge. However, if you leave it until it gets to that real scabby Band-Aid type consistency, it is very hard to eat and very hard to reheat, and you will probably dry reach. I'm nearly gagging just thinking about what that would be like right now. So eat the porridge while it's hot tip, and then maybe go for second breakfast after that. You do need to eat more than you would normally eat. It is freezing cold and your body will need the energy to provide warmth while down there. So other jobs that could be on offer. They could be doing some blacksmithing on the blacksmith's forge. Sometimes there's some gardening in the hot houses, so in the igloos that are sort of down there. It might be milking the cows. It could be digging holes. It could be putting in fence posts. Students were very largely involved, probably more recently, in the Chook Hacienda, which a chicken was killed in the process. It did get underneath a very large door a few years ago, and it was eaten as a result of being squashed by said door when it fell off the hinges. So it didn't go to waste, but it wasn't really part of the menu for that day. But all of the food and the meat is generally butchered by local butchers and I guess grown on site. So if you do have sausages or some sort of roast for the day, it will probably be named, and it would be named after a Mittagundi staff member generally. So you might be having Stacey for dinner, or you might be having Mark or Anton or whoever the cow or animal was named after. I can't remember the pigs' names last year, but there were some little piglets, I think, last year kicking around. So, and they sort of get put in some very large chest freezers, which are gas-powered chest freezers. So it could be lots of wood chopping, keeping the fires moving and going because even all of the cooking happens on very large Arga stoves. The kitchen is one of the warmest places in Mittagundi. It has been redone a couple of times and the boards are actually close together, so there's no draft. Obviously, the kitchen does require greater sealing and hygiene practices, so it's easier to work with hygiene practices when all the boards are actually close together. In the larger parts of Mittagundi, the floorboards, you could probably see through them in many places because they're spread out a little bit. Some of them have been stripped down by hand. Many of them are from recycled products, so there are a few little holes and things like that in some of the buildings. Most buildings are made out of large sort of alpine ash logs. The more recent buildings have been done after some large fires, and alpine ash have been sort of farmed and then put together as log huts. So students are heavily involved in building projects while at Mittagundi. Can be a little bit tricky during the winter phases, and many building projects have happened while St Philip's have been there. There are obviously animals on site at Mittagundi. Sometimes students might be clearing blackberries or setting up fences. Graham's probably quite versed at maintenance type jobs. He scores a whole bunch of things because he's quite handy down there, so you could ask Graham about some of the exciting jobs that they've given him while he was down there. In a previous life, when I first got to St Philip's, I think I pulled nails out of boards to have those boards reused later on. But having 10 students in charge with hammers and just a pile of timber that was over your head with nails in it every, 600 was quite dangerous, and we managed not to have any impaled objects whilst denailing, so that was a positive. There are obviously procedures in place if students are using like heavier items. There are boots, gumboots, steel caps, protective eyewear and things like that if axes and stuff are being used. Many students get quite excited about splitting wood. I'm not sure if it's just because most of the wood here in Alice Springs has termites in it and we don't really get to use it very often, or they just really like menacing sort of actions with axes. But some people are very handy at chopping wood down to very small sizes. Depending on where the wood is going, if it's going into the boiler to heat up the water for a hot shower a couple of times while you're down at Mittagundi, that wood probably needs to be split down a little bit more so you can sort of fire up the boiler. There's stuff going the whole time while at Mittagundi, and it does revolve around feeding. So there is a large bell that will be rung, and if people don't appear for a feed, you might miss out sometimes. But I think it's fair to say there are probably up to 5 meals a day. By the time you have, a hearty breakfast, you have a hearty morning tea, a solid lunch, an afternoon tea, and then a dinner. There are a range of times where feeding does happen. You might have seen some sort of large slabs of bread. Students would have handwiches. So you do sort of have to hold usually the top because the bread's made, and you will have to carry it when you're up in the snow. And if you have it on the outside of the pack and it's not packed very well, it might be slightly frozen, along with maybe some capsicum garnish, which can freeze a little bit too, depending on where you put it in your pack. But you tend to have handwiches at Mittagundi. So my advice would be to put as many things on that handwich as you can and sort of slowly push that into your mouth, but make sure you sort of eat all of that handwich and then make sure you come back. The chutneys and preserves that go on, pretty good, and they'll really help with taste extravaganza while you're there. Our 4-day cross-country ski trip has been a highlight for many, and it depends on where the snow has fallen as to what that looks like and how much skiing and how much walking to get there. So we drive up to basically an alpine closure where the road is closed and there's a permanent hazardous road closure. So once we get to that point, the buses or vehicles can't actually go any further. If there's snow, there's a reasonable chance that you'll get to ski from that point, which is a lot like walking. If you guys can walk like you do around school most of the time, sort of something that's like a shuffling sort of motion, this would be pretty good at Mittagundi. So if you put your backpack on and then you have a ski, you just kind of get a little bit of heel lift, life's going to be pretty good. And you'll find that if you actually get to that point where you can kind of actually move along, and as you're going along, you can actually slide, which is actually very fun on skis. If you get behind a couple of bigger people and they've compressed it and they haven't fallen over in front of you, you'll then have 2 tracks in front of you, which you can then ski along in. If someone has literally dived their head into the snow, pushing it all the way through almost to the asphalt on the road, and you can sort of see the impression of their nose and stuff like that, and the skis went both ways, then there's a good chance that you might fall into the same hole or you'll hit that student as well. So unlike downhill skiing, where your heels are locked down and they're designed for turning and really supportive, in a downhill ski, you guys can probably get to a position where you could literally relax all of your muscles and stand there effectively, and you could like, whoa, you can lean back and you can lean forwards because of the planks, and all you need to do is like, I want to go over there, and you just literally point and your body will twist and the skis will magically turn because of, you know, parabolic shapes. Forget all of that, because your skis will be probably a bit taller than you are, and they'll be, I don't know, about 55 to 70 millimetres wide, and they'll be straight. They're designed for going in straight lines and cross-country style skiing across things. So at times, like if you're coming down a hill and you know that there's potential of a creek, you want to sort of make that ski even longer effectively by getting into a more stable stance so that you don't sort of just both ski tips just disappear and head plant straight in. If you have your backpack on, it can be very difficult to get out once you have got to the point where you're falling down, your feet are probably out there, your backpack's pushing you into the ground, and it probably weighs, I don't know, 15 kilos, and then you kind of got these like 2 metre long things on your feet. It's very tricky to get up from this point, and you will practice. I would suggest that you keep your toes out and literally try and get your bum up. Your backpack will probably come over your head, and if you kind of keep going, you might actually be able to like roll your knees in and grab the edges, but not so much that your feet go further out, because the edge will go faster on its edge if you don't grab it in the right way. So there are many ways, and the Mittagundi staff will help you. You will fall over without a backpack on, and then you will practice getting up. If you are one of those people who's like, no, I've got it, and you just sit down and you turn yourself into a human cannonball because you sat on your skis, you will probably just go faster and faster, and you may not stop. So, which is problematic. So all you need to do from this point is go sideways, and it's very graceful, and you sort of land on something a bit meatier. If it was icy, you'll probably go scattering and like sort of buzzing around and stuff like that, spinning around. The other students will then smack into you because they've all experienced the same thing. It'll be carnage. You'll all be laughing. There'll probably be a broken ski because St. Philip's students often break skis at Mittagundi. They're not really designed for impacts into backpacks or other students. Please don't swallow the end of the ski. That can be something that can happen because it's not attached to the heel. It can come all the way up. So, you know, try to dodge that ski tip as your face is going towards it. Ski touring can be dangerous. It can also be fun if you have any pre-existing injuries or ailments. And like around knees and ankles, there are some snowshoes available, which is really just for the trail runners out there that, you know, want to have an extra quiver to their running style. I can see a few trail runners potentially thinking, oh, snowshoes, that'd be amazing. I could just go trail running on the snow. So that could happen. People do have that. There are some sleds as well to help get a little bit of equipment around at Mittagundi. But effectively, skiing is not like the movies at Mittagundi. Okay, we're travelling, it's largely flat. You'll get chances to bomb it down hills. You'll probably get to make a jump. It'll probably be really lame though. It'll be sort of like a jump that'll be like somewhere around mid-shin, and it will terrify most of you. So ski touring, we are going into an alpine environment, and there are times where the alpine environment can be quite dangerous. And I know that in the last couple of years, we've had to come back down a day early because of the weather warnings and the hazards associated with being stuck in a really exposed location with a large group of students that don't have much experience. So we have shortened a couple of the ski trips over the last couple of years, so it might end up being 3 days. And that might be where you end up going for an abseil, or you might do something down along the river, but it might not necessarily be a farm day as a result. So there's always a trade-off to these things. Last year, one of the groups got to walk so far that was the most exhausting experience of their lives because the snow wasn't available where it had been the year before. So we had to walk a little bit further, and that can be tiring because not only do you have the stuff with you for those 3 nights, but you're carrying the ski gear as well. So you probably have ski boots, skis, poles, all the associated wet weather gear, but then you might have your hiking boots as well, or some sneakers or something that you can wear around as a shoe when you get there if they are wet. Cross-country skiing is amazing. Hopefully you'll get to build an igloo. Skiing and walking uphill with a pack. There are many tips for walking uphill with a pack. The skis generally have a pattern on them, so you kind of need to change your normal walking stance from around school from this to sort of almost walking a little bit further out in front, more weight on the heel will engage your pattern really well. As it gets steeper, like you literally turn your skis out and you'll be sort of walking a little bit more sort of, is that a pigeon toe? So your toes will be pointing out, so you can go up quite steep things, and then you'll get to a point where you need to actually turn sideways and like try to engage the edges, which won't have any metal on them, and then kind of go up if it gets really steep. If you're going up a hill and you're needing this technique, probably don't turn around and try and go straight down, because it'll probably involve a cliff or a really steep turn. And that could end badly. Skiing and walking uphill with a pack. Preparation for the ski trips at Mittagundi. There's a fair bit of preparation, making sure that we have our 2 pairs of thermals, making sure that we probably have more than the recommended number of woolly socks to take, making sure that you have rain jackets, overpants, all of those sorts of things. So Mittagundi provide all of that personal safety equipment, and then we have a fairly extensive list. If you are very well equipped at home because you're prone to going to the snow or doing lots of walking and those sorts of things, you might be able to bring some other optional items, but just maybe get them checked out before taking them down there. If you have like ski jackets for sort of, you know, skiing overseas that are lined, it's probably going to be a no. If it's a Gore-Tex shell type jacket, it's probably, or some sort of breathable membrane, it's probably going to be pretty good if it's seam sealed and it's got a hood on it. So you might consider taking your own personal one if it's really comfy and you can get a few layers under it. Baking, meal preparation, we had a little bit of a chat about that already. I probably jump around a bit. Pioneer skills, obviously axes will be involved at some stage. Most people will be holding onto an axe, probably in a relatively menacing fashion. The staff are used to students with axes. And yeah, we haven't lost any limbs while axes have been getting used. I don't think we've ever really had any really bad burns while the blacksmithing forge has been used. So usually with the blacksmithing forge, Mittagundi will probably have like a single staff member that's dedicated to that, and he'll try and make sure that almost every student that wants to have a go on the forge gets a go while we're there, for example. Don't think that you're going to get too elaborate. It's probably going to be something like some simple twists, maybe a knot, something to poke things in the fire. It would probably be used and maybe sold at some of the Mittagundi fundraising locations. You might be able to buy it at the end if you are really lucky. Mittagundi do have at the end, and I'm not sure whether it's just the frenzy associated with students and purchasing and not having access to money and funds or spending money, but at the end, most St. Philip students probably ensure that they walk away with a Mittagundi hoodie. I don't know if you guys noticed when the Year 10s got back last year, but suddenly there was a massive influx of Mittagundi hoodies and bumper stickers getting around. And for an area that's a very long way from the snow or the alpine region, we have a disproportionate number of Mittagundi bumper stickers and Mittagundi hoodies floating around in this town. So we will have some more information about merchandise, but obviously that's a cash sort of entity at Mittagundi. They have one of those magic cards that does internet banking or any of that sort of stuff. All in the notes. Clothing and equipment, it is very comprehensive. Mittagundi do provide a lot of that specialist equipment. The sheets and pillowcases, it's a weird one, but Mittagundi have a whole bunch of bunk beds, and students spend most of their nights not in the snow, but at Mittagundi, and they're on bunk beds. So a fitted sheet, maybe an inner sheet, and a pillowcase to put on the pillows. Washing at Mittagundi, they don't just have washing machines. So the washing that happens at Mittagundi is often students in large vats of hot soapy water, beating it up and down with a stick, stirring it around, a little bit like a scene, you know, with a witch in some sort of Wizards and Warlocks sort of bubble, toilet and trouble type arrangement for washing linen. So you guys it'd be great if you had some linen to take with you. I think that college sleeping bag that you've been provided with in Year 7 is also on that list. Sometimes, like, I think that it's a -5 rated bag, so that probably wouldn't be a bad idea. At Mittagundi, they often will also have a range of other sleeping bags that can be added. So when you go to the snow, you might actually get a second one with a zipper that doesn't work or something, and it is used as a doona over the top to support your sleeping bag and boost it up for those cold nights. Woolen or fleece, only some types. It depends where you're getting your fleeces, but sometimes those fleeces can be sort of made out of some stuff that is not very effective at keeping you warm. Be sure to sort of have a little bit of a look around, engage with the material, talk to other people that have been, like beg, borrow, steal these things. Jumpers, beanies, gloves, socks, obviously things that have sort of thermal properties even when they're wet is the important thing. Thermal underwear is essential, long top and bottoms. It's probably good to have a couple. If you can imagine your son or daughter using the same thermal for potentially 9 days at Mittagundi, they can get a little whiffy if you have polypropylene. If you are wearing like a woolen-based thermal, you could probably get a few more days out of that one. I know I've personally worn woolen thermals for up to 10 days in New Zealand and had sweat stains literally from head to toe, and it changed colour, and it probably wasn't too bad at the end of it, but maybe not personally having a large issue with pongy pits, so that's probably pretty good. I would have a couple. I would maybe talk to other friends and family, probably not someone that's going on Year 9 camp, because they might not want to give it to you because they might be on Year 9 camp, but there would be a bunch of students that have been on Year 11. Thermals are generally like snug and tight, and it doesn't really matter whether they're boys or girls ones. By the time they go on, if they're snug and tight and fitting, they're still going to have thermal properties. So consider those ones. When we're going down there, we don't get a backpack like we do for year 9 and year 11 and year 8 when we're at the college. You just bring your stuff down in a soft bag. If it is wet when we get to Mittagundi, it's not uncommon for the bus to stop down on the asphalt and us to have to walk up sort of like a 4-wheel drive track to get into Mittagundi proper. If you have one of those bags with the tiny little wheels on it for getting around the airport, you will die. It is really hard to carry that thing around. So if you have like a duffel bag or something that you can get over your shoulder, or some oversized novelty strap that you can strap onto your wheelie bag, be prepared that you may be carrying it for sort of about 1 kilometre up the road, and those little wheels don't work once they go off-road very well. Yeah, hopefully you can start planning on that one. Clothing for Melbourne as well. It will be winter. We can always pick the Alice Springs students walking around because they'll be the ones in shorts walking around in midwinter in Melbourne. The last night of the program is actually at a YHA in CBD Melbourne. So students will obviously be in Melbourne during that time and probably going somewhere on site. It will depend on where the staff feel like that they have capacity to take you while you're in Melbourne. But you will be sort of moving around out in the wilds of Melbourne. Watch out for cars, those sorts of things that we're not necessarily used to around here. Mobile phones can be a little bit of a hazard sometimes at Mittagundi. Mittagundi have a really good strategy where when you get off the bus, they turn up with a large bag and you put all said items into that bag. That will probably also happen when you get to the accommodation in Bairnsdale. There will probably be a bag. All phones will go into that bag for the night. You'll probably get them for a couple of hours in the morning as you disconnect from your last social media experiences and all of those platforms. Disconnect, goodbye cruel world, I'll see you in 9 days, I can't wait to see you again, all those cry faces, tears, thumbs down, whatever you need to do. But ideally, using those phones should be very responsibly. I would imagine that if you had your phone and you were in Bairnsdale, that you are not calling Uber Eats at 10:30 to get a slushie or something delivered to the caravan park, for example. That would not be an okay use of your phone, and you might not see it until you get back to the college. It might even go into the hub in those scenarios where you are misusing the privilege of having your phone while you're on a program. But we hand all of them in, so very much on our circadian rhythms. When the sun gets up, you guys get up. When the sun goes down, everyone gets sleepy and the debriefs happen and then everyone goes to bed. So those sorts of things happen. You will probably get a fair bit of sleep at Mittagundi because we're in midwinter, so the days are quite short. And sometimes you will get up in the darkness and you will go to bed in the darkness as you would at home. Equipment, I guess there's a lot out there. You would have a bit from year 9. Hopefully you still fit into some of that stuff from year 9. Should be available to avoid extravagantly large purchases. So Loan are always very good and they provide us with some options. There's obviously quite a few students that work in there as well. You can beg, borrow, steal from parents, friends, relatives, those sorts of things. We've had a lot of students going to Mittagundi over the years and that number steadily goes up, but there should be some fallout. If you start going into op shops and stuff like that now, I'll also be saying the same thing to the year 9s, the year 8s and the year 11s. But if you start going into op shops now, they have some chance to resupply some of those warm jumpers and things that you might, prized items that you might be able to find in some of the oppies if there's a demand for them now. It might seem ridiculous, but now could be the time to strike if you're an op shopper. Good source of woolen jumpers. Loan Dingo do offer students a bit of a discount and that rough student pricing list is there for all of our programs, but they're pretty good in there. But they have a limited amount that they can stock and supply. So program dates, We are going in term 3. So if you do have some exchange things that you're trying to line up, make sure that you're checking if that's in during term 3. Mittagundi Group 1, which comprises of 2 groups. So, you know, up to 48 students, is the 22nd of July to the 1st of August. So it should be in your Operoo standing. Group 1 basically return to home to normal classes at the start of week 3. Mittagundi Group 2 from the 2nd to the 12th of August. Same number of places, and my head's floating over that other information. But they're starting on the Tuesday of week 3. Anyway, I need to remove. Mr. Kimber will be coming out with greater clarity around those expectations. Last year there were some online things organised, and also many students were doing some work experience as well during that time while there was a little bit of stand down. So student responsibilities, oral hygiene, closely, you know, periodontal disease, closely related to heart disease and other conditions as well. So make sure you take your toothbrush, brush your teeth while you're out there. We like it. You can see a very young Mr. Tudor there brushing his teeth at Mittagundi some years ago now. Be prepared and organised. Like, have a good idea. Like, I don't know how many hours we've spent organising that itinerary on the letter, the second letter to parents. The itinerary is very detailed. It has lots of information in it that's very useful. Please engage with it. So being organised, maybe even have a copy of it with you so you can answer some of those questions as we go. All groups on all camps, as long as you have a willingness to learn and put your best foot forwards, you will have a positive time. If you kind of have a very negative attitude, it's like, oh, camp sucks, it's really cold down here in Victoria, my feet are wet, it's miserable, it's actually raining, oh, my tent fell down in the night because it was really windy and I had to get up and go to the toilet, but I didn't want to because I had to put on all my layers and it was freezing cold. All of these sorts of things will probably happen. Going to the toilet in the snow, much more complicated than it is down here. Obviously, you know, just ducking outside. The snow's a really big giveaway as well. If you decide to just like, oh look, here's my tent, I'm not going too far. It's like, it's going to look like a yellow snow cone the next morning. Everyone's going to know. If you have a quick twinkle right next to the tent during a blizzard, it will still be there. Don't eat yellow snow. That's my best advice. It might look like lemonade or some sort of citrus one, but don't eat it. Probably not much snow to eat generally at Mittagundi. What does happen is it tends to snow in Victoria and then it melts and then it snows again. But in between all these snow events, we sort of also have large amounts of dust and debris going over the top, and then that sits on top of the snow, and then as it melts a little bit, that debris kind of moves down. The snow is often quite crunchy. It has, you know, a bit of extra protein. It has a little bit of soil and other organic materials in it that we probably don't need to eat. It's not great for our eat a little bit. It's good to eat a little bit. Go and get it from somewhere discreetly that doesn't look like a toileting tree sort of area. Probably don't eat it straight off the road, like cars have other things that come out of them as well, which then land on the road, and eating snow off the road, bad idea. Just be mindful that your body also, if you eat lots of snow, has to warm that snow up to melt it and then absorb it. If you are drinking water, it'll probably be quite cold too, but you're not melting ice and frozen material with all of your body warmth. So we need to be very mindful about eating snow while we're there, amongst other things. Try new things and participate fully. Not everyone is going to want to go and dig a hole during those jobs on the farm. Not everyone is going to want to cook and provide a meal and sort of prepare a meal. Have a go at all of those things. So just be open-minded, jump in, fill gaps where they're needed. As with other programs, we're trying to respect ourselves, and respecting ourselves is always about looking after number one. If we can't look after number one, we're going to have a lot of trouble respecting other people and respecting the environment. So look after yourself. Make sure that you don't have wet, freezing cold prune, dead man fingers and toes sorts of things. Don't eat too much snow. And then you'll be able to help and look after your mates. Be mindful when it is an appropriate time to have a snow fight. If you are going on a backcountry ski trip for 4 days and you are already starting to have snow fights straight out of the car because of the novelty of snow, someone will end up with a perforated eardrum, or if snow is going to go down the back of their neck, which is really, really funny initially, but then if it's still cold and wet, that snow is going to melt and it's going to go down their back, and they're in waterproof, so it's going to stay inside unless they heat it up to the point where it turns into a vapor and then it sort of dissipates into the air. It's going to go all the way down into your crack, and if you've got cotton undies on, or it's going to get in there and it's going to sit down in your nether regions, and then it's going to get really cold and be really uncomfortable. So it can freeze your undies in there. Oh, goodness, that wasn't me. Good, eh? Be mindful about when is appropriate and those sorts of things. If you are having a snow fight, make sure that you've battened the hatches. Don't cop them in the sides of the head. Don't sort of permanently compact the snow to the point where it now resembles a small piece of cement and then peg it at your mate, because it will really, really hurt. It will be like throwing a rock at their head in certain conditions. Look after other people. Some of your mates aren't going to be comfy. They're not going to be comfy carrying the backpack. They're going to have lots of trouble skiing. They're going to have trouble being wet constantly. They're going to have trouble with the wind, they'll get blown on skis. They'll be falling over. You'll need to help pick them up. Their packs are heavy. All of these things will happen. So we're trying to work cohesively as a group and move through together. Obviously, the environment's pretty important too. So think about where you may be toileting, and Mittagundi staff will talk to you about that. Looking after your rubbish, making sure that we're not snapping trees and breaking stuff as we're sort of passing through the environment as well. You guys are largely responsible for your own existence. Your parents are not going to be there telling you not to do silly things. If you can answer, am I being respectful for myself? Am I being respectful for others? Am I being respectful for the environment? If you can say no to any one of those 3 questions by asking yourself, it's probably not a great idea to do it. But yeah, we do want to basically follow some of the rules at school. Mittagundi have their own system. It's very similar to ours. Be a good person and a good student. Don't get into prohibitive substances and other things like that. We are not going walking in the middle of the night unaccompanied with staff. Those sorts of things. Have fun, but don't be silly, please. All right, so we've talked a little bit about Mittagundi. One of the other offerings we have in Outdoor Ed this year is that if you feel like you missed out on Year 9 last year and you really want to get a piece of that action and go up over the Razorback with a fun, like-minded group of other adults without their children who are escaping the grim realities of their normal job and coming out to have a meaningful experience, a shared experience in the outdoors, let us know. Get into that one. If it's the first time you're hearing about it, the Adults Endeavour program, we do need about 10 people to make that go ahead. So a few people are getting interested in that, which is great. Have a think about it. Have a chat. Obviously, if you have a son or daughter out there while Year 9's on, you could sort of have a bit of a gag with them if they're not here about going on camp with them. We also have the college's 3 hours of power coming up, which is 3 hours, 7 till 10 p.m. in 2 weekends' time, in total darkness with lights out of the telegraph station on a reasonably user-friendly trail, high speeds. It used to be known as the 12-hour. However, if you want to ride as a team for 12 hours, we're simply combining it so that all 4 of you ride at the same time for those 3 hours, and your times are combined, as opposed to one person riding around in the darkness for hours and hours and hours all by themselves, and other people sort of getting matchsticks at 1 a.m. to watch their mates ride. That's going on as well. All right, back to Mittagundi. Action required. What do we need to do? Advise us really soon, like by Friday, if you're planning on organising airfares. There would have been a little bit of information in Operoo about the airfare, but Lynn in accounts is pretty keen to allocate that to people, so that's going to happen on Friday. If you are needing to book, let us know. I think a couple of people have already let us know. The flights are $1,050, which is pretty horrendous, I know, and there's probably many parents like, we should get on Bonza and all those sorts of things. Unfortunately, that's where we're up to. Qantas do provide us with a little bit of flexibility to change names and move students around and things like that, and they're a reasonably reliable operator, but we will be looking into other providers in the future. Medical information and consent on attendance. A lot of people have probably ticked that it's all true and correct. If anything's changed, if anything needs updating, if there's anything that I need to be aware of so I can pass that on to Mittagundi to help your young person get through that experience and be involved, I'm more than happy to be consulted or informed. Please let us know. Complete everything as accurately as possible. We provide the medical information to Mittagundi in summaries. So if it's not in the summary, Mittagundi won't have that information. Don't forget to register for the 3 hours of power. Tick. Great.